Hello everyone! This part of my retrospective series will be covering replays and some aspects of speedrunning in Happy Wheels. Fair disclaimer, I wrote most of the script for this video in 2020, while the Flash version of Happy Wheels was still online. A lot of the video clips that I am using are from that older version of the game. Almost everything that I'm going to cover in this video is still relevant to the JavaScript port that is currently available on TotalJerkface.com. Where there are differences between the versions, I will mention them. Now, on with the video. Replays are an incredible feature of Happy Wheels. The game has a built-in mechanism for the recording and sharing of gameplay. At the end of a playthrough, the pause menu appears. If I click the button View Replay, the game reiterates my button presses to recreate my playthrough. You don't actually have to complete the level to create a replay. If you replay an incomplete playthrough, the game will reiterate all of your inputs until the point at which you stop playing or the character dies. Then the replay will keep going with no new inputs for an indeterminate length of time. You can see this phenomenon in one of the user-made playthroughs on my level, JB's New Bicycle. The player quit partway through the playthrough, but the vehicle continues to drift almost all of the way to the end of the level. It's actually really impressive just how accurate these replays are, assuming that I replay them on the same computer on which I recorded them. The movements of the character are reproduced exactly, and they aren't affected by lag in the game. Sometimes, when I play Happy Wheels, my computer experiences bad lag for several seconds at a time, due in part to tasks that are running in the background and occupying memory. This makes the game look really bad and choppy. You might think that lag would adversely affect the physics, as it does in many games that have variable frame rates. To my surprise, the replay plays out correctly regardless of lag. I can load up the same replay later when I'm not experiencing a lag spike, and the exact same outcome is achieved. It just looks much better and there's a higher frame rate. This tells me that the movements of shapes in this game are calculated very precisely, and that there's some sort of process in place to correctly calculate the values independently of the effects of the frame rate that is at a given time. What's really cool is that I can choose whether or not to save a given playthrough after I've completed it. Happy Wheels automatically keeps a temporary cache of input data, which it can reproduce and save if I so choose. I don't have to manually set up a recording before every playthrough. This feature is extremely convenient for gaming YouTubers like myself. Let's say that I'm playing a particularly difficult level, and there's no easily reproducible way to win. I have to put in a lot of trial and error to progress. I might play the level 30 times before I get a lucky playthrough that has all of the right factors in place such that I can proceed. Now, how would I record in this situation? I could use a video recording program on my computer and have it running for the entire time that I'm playing, though this would be very inefficient. I would create a very large video file, and I would have to parse through it to find the one playthrough that I want to actually use for my published video. In this case, it's better to not be recording for the whole length of my playtime. I play through the level however many times it takes, and when I do eventually get a good usable playthrough, I hit the Save Replay button at the end. Then, the game saves the reproducible input data for just that one playthrough. I can then view my saved replay and capture it within my video recording program. There's no need to record any of the ineffectual playthroughs, so this method is very efficient. When I save a playthrough, the game also shares it publicly for the whole Happy Wheels community to see. When I click on this button beside the level's description, the game shows a whole playlist of the playthroughs that players have shared. This list neatly organizes them by a time of completion. If the player didn't technically satisfy the level's win condition, their playthrough goes towards the bottom of the list. As a level designer, I love watching other people's replays. By their descriptions and playstyles, I can somehow identify the aspects of my levels that players have enjoyed. Some level designers enjoy making competitions out of their levels. They might say, fastest completion time gets a shout out in my next level. With this convenient replay system, it's very easy to determine which player got the fastest time and to watch the winning replay for myself. Not only are replays an easy way to show off your fastest speedrun of a Happy Wheels level, they are also a very useful tool in the development of faster speedrun strategies. When I view my replay, the game doesn't only show the movements of the character on screen, it also shows my unique sequence of key presses in real time. These replays include a lot of information that you wouldn't see in a simple screen recording or live gameplay. You can study the specific sequence of inputs in a fast playthrough and try to reproduce it. If you wasted time in a specific area, you can take note of the specific inputs that you made in that area and avoid making the same mistake in your next playthrough. If you run enough iterations and you learn enough from the replays that you've studied, you could, theoretically, come up with the optimal speedrun. In the speedrunning community, it's a common practice to record one's button inputs and display them in a video feed. There are proprietary programs like Gamepad Viewer that record inputs. But you don't need any such program to view your inputs within Happy Wheels. The game natively supports this feature, making it very easy for new players to take interest in speedrunning strategies. The built-in replay functions of Happy Wheels are quite incredible. I don't know of any other browser game that makes it this easy for users to save and share their gameplay. However, this system isn't perfect. It has some unfortunate flaws that are related to the limitations of Flash-based platforms. I hope that I've been clear in my explanation of how Happy Wheels saves replays. If you load up another player's replay, you're not actually watching a video recording of the player's playthrough. What you're actually seeing is a very precise recreation of that playthrough, which the game engine is rendering natively and in real time on your computer. The game engine reproduces the player's button inputs to move the character. Since the game runs on simulated physics, and the rules of physics are well defined and reproducible, the same set of inputs should result in the same outcome. However, it doesn't always work out that way. As you all should know, Happy Wheels is a Flash game. The Flash Player plugin runs slightly differently on different computer operating systems. The small differences in how computers process commands can have very slight effects on how the physics of this game work. You probably won't notice these differences when you're playing the game for yourself. For most intents and purposes, Happy Wheels on a Windows computer feels the same as Happy Wheels on a Mac. However, you can notice the differences in how some replays play out. If you take a sequence of inputs that you recorded on one computer and reproduce it exactly on another computer, you may not see the same outcome. A very slight difference in how operating systems process the same inputs can create a difference between a win and an early death. I've witnessed this firsthand. I've recorded a lot of playthroughs on an old Windows 7 computer that no longer works. I've viewed some of those playthroughs on my current Windows 10 computer in the Flash version of Happy Wheels, and a lot of them don't go to completion. Because of this problem, Happy Wheels classifies all replays as either accurate or inaccurate. If a replay is accurate, that means that the player saved it on the same operating system that you're currently using. You should be viewing their same outcome. If a replay is inaccurate, the operating systems are different. You may observe a very similar outcome, or the slight differences in physics may be substantial enough to create a completely different outcome. If a replay is inaccurate, it may still run to completion. This is especially true for short and simple levels that have few hazards that could kill the player. What really sucks is that there's no simple way to fix this problem. It would be very difficult to make it such that everyone who loads a replay sees exactly the same outcome. One seemingly obvious solution would be to upload video files to the Total Jerkface servers. One could record a video file on the same operating system that the player is using. The video would be accurate to the player's experience, and would look very much the same to anyone who views it. However, such a solution would be very difficult to actually implement. Video files are huge, especially if they're in HD. They take up much more data than a simple list of timed inputs. To store a video file for every one of the hundreds of millions of replays in Happy Wheels, that would require untold petabytes of data.
That's simply not sustainable on the scope on which Happy Wheels operates.
So, yeah, inaccurate replays are going to continue to be a problem well into the future. That's unless if we convince everyone to use the same operating system, or, alternatively, if someone figures out how to make the game run exactly the same across different operating systems. But overall, the option to save replays has done a lot of good for the Happy Wheels community. I'm grateful to have it. I think that replays contributed greatly to the popularity of Happy Wheels on YouTube. A lot of people have played the game, and a lot of them have wanted to make videos about it.
And many of these players were young people who had no previous experience recording gameplay. But in Happy Wheels, saving gameplay is very easy. You can save your best runs as replays, and have them all in a convenient playlist that you can access later. At a later date, you can figure out a good method to record these replays as video files that you can edit and upload. These convenient features lessen the learning curve of recording gameplay. They especially reduce the degree of planning and organization required to get serviceable recordings. Because of this, a lot of YouTubers got their starts with Happy Wheels. They didn't necessarily have the skill set or the equipment required to get high-quality recordings of most of their favorite games.
But they started with Happy Wheels, which is an entry-level game that's easy to record. That's how it happened for me, at least.
The ability to make replays has been included in Happy Wheels since the very first public version of the game. However, it wasn't actually until September of 2010 that the game started displaying a completion time on the victory banner. Before then, users had to look at the time listed on the replay browser. In the Flash version, some replays did actually run to completion, even if they were listed as inaccurate. If the inputs of a replay are sufficiently simple, and the geometry of the level is sufficiently straightforward, the small differences in how operating systems run calculations may not be enough to affect different outcomes between a win and no win. Though there's no fully consistent way to know this before you actually load up an inaccurate replay in the browser and watch it.
Now, that video that I just showed was from the Flash version. It's a different situation with the current JavaScript port. If a replay is listed as inaccurate in the JavaScript port, you can be pretty confident that it will not run to completion.
From the perspective of a player who is actively playing the game, the physics of the JavaScript port don't look noticeably different from those of the older Flash versions. Shapes seem to fall at the same speed. Characters accelerate and move as I would expect them to. The controls feel responsive. However, there apparently are some significant differences in how objects interact. A specific sequence of inputs that was recorded in a Flash version won't produce the exact same outcome when replayed in the JavaScript port. There are small differences in how physical interactions are calculated between the two versions. These differences are hardly noticeable during gameplay, if at all, but they definitely make a difference in a longer replay. Small miscalculations compile over the course of the run, and they often make the difference between a character driving to the finish and the character falling over and dying prematurely. If an inaccurate replay is more than a few seconds long, or if the level requires especially precise inputs to result a winning run, it is highly likely that the inaccurate replay will not represent a win when viewed in the JavaScript port. This is even more apparent in the port than in earlier Flash versions. This phenomenon doesn't just apply to inaccurate replays anymore.
In the JavaScript port, many replays that are listed as accurate won't even run to completion. This is because of a very obvious oversight in how the replay browser is organized.
The browser determines whether or not a replay is accurate for your particular computer based on a few factors, such as your operating system, the stable version of Flash Player that you're running, and the bit generation of your computer, whether it's 32-bit or 64-bit. In some cases, the browser may also check the updated version of Happy Wheels in which the replay was recorded. Some updates have tweaked the physics of the game in such ways that can affect the outcome of a replay. Look at Jim's post from June 16th of 2010. If I'm interpreting this correctly, any replays recorded before or shortly after that date were not considered accurate in the subsequent updated version of the game. If the relevant factors are the same between your computer and the computer on which the replay was recorded, the browser will consider the replay to be accurate. For all practical purposes, the specific sequence of inputs should run the same on both machines. And these assumptions generally held true when Happy Wheels was hosted in Flash Player. A replay would indeed run the same on two different computers, so long as the operating systems and such matched. But when TotalJerkface.com made the switch from Flash Player to JavaScript, this change introduced a new factor for which the browser does not actually account. The browser doesn't actually check whether a replay was recorded in a Flash version or in the JavaScript port. A Flash replay will be listed as accurate in JavaScript if the operating systems and the bit generation match. The browser completely ignores the factor that many interactions run completely differently between Flash and JavaScript.
So if you're playing the JavaScript port and you see a replay that was recorded before the 28th of December 2020, you can know immediately that the replay is technically inaccurate, regardless of what the thumb says. That's a really obvious mistake. I'm surprised that the developers left that issue unaddressed.
As far as I can tell, a significant majority of replays that were recorded in a Flash version will not run to completion in the port. This is unfortunate. It means that most replays in the game's history are essentially lost. There's no way to reproduce them in the version of the game that's currently online in a way that is accurate to how the players originally experienced them.
The next few videos in this series are going to be about speedrunning in Happy Wheels, but while I'm still on the subject of replays, I'm going to discuss why it's a common standard in Happy Wheels to submit a replay as proof of a speedrunning record.
For the purposes of these videos, I am going to consider Speedrun.com as the authority in documenting speedrunning records in full game categories, as well as in individual levels. For certain levels, faster times may be listed in the replay browser on TotalJerkface.com. Unfortunately, I can't verify times in most replays at this time, because most replays are inaccurate in the current online version of Happy Wheels. I have to use the runs that are listed on speedrun.com because they are preserved as video files that replay correctly and allow me to see how the runs played out with accuracy. Every speedrunning community has some minimum standard of proof to verify that submitted runs were achieved legitimately, without cheating. Some are more strict than others. Many communities require that top runners stream all of their attempts live. This is to make it more difficult to publish a pre-recorded run that may be spliced together from multiple different runs or made entirely within a tool-assisted emulator, and to pass off such a run as legitimate. The Happy Wheels community isn't that strict. If you upload a YouTube video of a replay that you've recorded and the moderators can verify that the account associated with the replay belongs to you, your run should be verified pretty easily. The moderators don't need to rely on auxiliary factors like live streams to lend credence to runs, because they can usually tell quite plainly whether or not a run is legitimate just by looking at the series of inputs in the replay. If a moderator sees a series of inputs that looks impossibly complex, and that a human player simply wouldn't be able to input in real time, it should be obvious. Most games don't natively support any method to record all of the inputs, so this method of verification would be more difficult to implement and more vulnerable to manipulation on the player's part. A player may be able to use a tool to input an extremely precise series of inputs that they wouldn't be able to reproduce in real time, and the moderator wouldn't necessarily be able to tell just by looking at the video. In most speedrunning streams, the button inputs aren't shown on screen, it's just the gameplay. Some runners do choose to show their inputs on screen, but doing so requires auxiliary software and hardware in some cases, and it's not a universal practice by any means. Another speedrunning community that never really got into live streaming is the Doom community. Players started sharing runs in the 90s, and their methods of doing so haven't really changed since then. Doom allows the player to save a demo file, which is a recording of the series of inputs that the player produced during the playthrough, very similar to a replay in Happy Wheels. Players can send these files to each other over the internet. The player that receives the file can play it back in their own copy of Doom to verify the time. What's really cool about demo files is that users can open them up in a file viewer and view every single input on a frame-by-frame basis. Moderators have sometimes used this method when evaluating runs. If they see a sequence of inputs that they consider to be physically impossible to input in real time, they can flag the run on suspicion of cheating. If you want to know more specifics about how demo files are evaluated, I recommend this video by Carl Jobst. While demo files are very useful in verifying the legitimacy of runs, they aren't infallible. Using modified source ports of the game, it is possible to edit a demo file and to change the sequence of inputs to one that results in a faster time. In some cases, it's not possible for a moderator to definitively prove whether or not a run was cheated,
given only the information to which they have access.
Some cheated runs may be extremely difficult to reproduce in real time, but still possible. In this sense, I think that Happy Wheels replays are actually more secure and reliable in comparison to Doom demo files. All of the public replays are saved securely on Fancy Force's servers. No one can manipulate a replay and change the time, unless if they somehow hack the servers, and I don't think that anything remotely like that has ever happened. Anyone who can access TotalJerkface.com can reiterate the replay and see its outcome, assuming that the replay is accurate. Even if it's inaccurate and it's from an older version of the game, the time is still listed in the replay browser. As long as someone has saved an accurate video recording of the replay and the time is listed correctly on the game's secure servers, we should be able to verify that a run was done legitimately.
Well, that is all for this video. Thank you for watching. Next time I will continue on the subject of speedrunning. Goodbye.